Welcome, welcome! You are getting Lost in Plot, the show where we focus on story first, but not exclusively, across the mediums of television, film, video games, really anything with a story. I'm Wade, that's my brother Jake, and today we have The Conjuring. The devil made me do it.
So let's go get lost in the plot. Fair warning, there are spoilers ahead. Here we go. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga return as real-life paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren in a chilling story of terror, murder, and evil, based on one of the most sensational cases from their files. This is the third film in the main series, and we're jumping ahead to 1981. We're also changing up the story structure. We find the Warrens performing an exorcism on an 8-year-old boy, so we're thrust into the middle of their next case instead of watching it slowly build from the start. The exorcism goes sideways, leading to a murder, and forcing the Warrens to play detective to find the master Satanist, cursing people with demonic possession. The mystery angle is intriguing, but I wasn't as invested in this story as the prior Conjuring films, and I think the reason for that is the change to story structure. When you throw the audience into the middle of a story, we inevitably have to flash back to do the work that got skipped, just so you could have an exciting opening sequence. That can work for mystery, but I'd argue it's not as effective in building terror. A big part of terror is not knowing what's going to happen next. This film shows you what's going to happen right from the jump. Then we have to turn around and go back to find out why. So there's some genre blending between mystery and horror, but it's not as effective as what they've done in the prior films. Anyway, the Warrens have to find the Satanist before the guy in jail for murder by demon gets possessed again and sacrifices himself. And that's the plot for The Conjuring. The devil made me do it.
Boy, that's such a smart point, too, what you mentioned. We're thrown into the story at peak demonic possession. We're thrown in like the middle of an exorcism with a small child. There's no build, there's no tension, there's no suspense. It's like, pah! You're getting it right away this time. And I don't think the film ever resets afterwards and is able to build suspense from that point on.
I agree, and I think terror is so much about those small moments, building up. The creak of a door, the creak of footsteps, a darkened basement. Those little atmospheric touches really build up the terror, so then when you give them the full force of it, you've got them. And when we're just kind of thrust into the middle of an exorcism, you've cheapened the whole thing, I feel like.
Yeah, and another good point you made is we're going for more mystery than we are horror here. There's a definite trade-off as opposed to the first two films, which are definitely horror-based, versus this one, which is basically wants to engross you in the mystery, I suppose.
It's not a linear narrative anymore.
No.
We're kind of like cutting to the middle of it, and then the mystery is, well, let's go back and find out why. And as a horror film, that's not really building up the suspense for us. That's kind of hitting the pause button and saying, whoa, let's go tackle some exposition here. And speaking of exposition, let's go ahead and talk about who wrote this.
That's right. Now, say my name.
So we've got David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick.
All of that.
Yep, all of that. A lot of names. Let's just call him David.
Okay.
So David has a good working relationship with director James Wan. You can tell by looking at the credits here. Starting with The Conjuring 2. He actually wrote the sequel back in 2016, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Do you remember Orphan?
Is that the movie where the guy he thinks he's adopting a little girl and she turns out to be like 42 and then wants to get romantic with him or something?
Yeah.
And there's a Skarsgård in there, right?
Yeah, and Vera Farmiga too.
That was
Yeah, that was Orphan. He wrote Orphan.
That was a humdinger of a movie, that one.
You're exactly right.
Yep. I saw
Wrath of the Titans in 2012. That was the sequel to Clash of the Titans. I didn't see that.
I didn't see either one of the Titans movies.
Okay. The Conjuring Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it. I gave that one a 7.
I really like that one as well. I come in at the exact same number. The Conjuring 2 was a big hit for me.
Okay. James Wan also directed that.
Yeah.
And then the two reunited for 2018's Aquaman.
Aquaman!
That's coming in at a 6 for me.
Yeah, that's about the same way for me. I enjoyed my time with Aquaman. Patrick Wilson also in that movie.
There you go. So the high water mark here is Are they playing a joke on us? Orphans in 8.8. What is the audience?
Oh, come on!
Yeah.
No, it's not!
It's right there. 8.8. Orphan from
You
2009.
people are perverts! That movie was bizarre! Oh, it was bizarre!
Yep. And then not great numbers for this recent one, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, sitting at a 6.6. So down from the sequel, The Conjuring 2 at 7.7.
Yeah.
We've got a bit of a drop-off here.
Yeah, it's rough.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I've got lots of thoughts. And in fact, let's get into my thoughts and we can do breaking the story. My one thing for The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is tone. Tone is how a storyteller sets an audience's expectations. It's why, when you're watching a romantic comedy, you don't expect terrorists to hijack the restaurant where the couple's having their first date. Now, tone, above all, must be consistent, lest you jar your audience out of the experience. Now, the Conjuring movies had an established tone. The first two films grounded the supernatural elements in realism. Realistic settings, realistic characters, heck, it's even based on true life events to a certain extent. They did this so that they could make the horror seem more plausible, which allows them to play off the psychology and conjure scares at whim. Sadly, that same tone is a little bit missing in this particular production. Now, in the first two films, Lorraine Warren had an understated psychic ability. It provided her only with vague glimpses of the past or a potential future and exacted a great toll whenever she used it. In this film, it's a full-on superpower. She summons it at will, solves a murder with it, and even forges a dark psychic link with the Master Satanist, who is our antagonist. We're no longer damning demons to hell. Instead, we're matching wits with a woman who developed an unhealthy fascination with being a Satanist. And this has granted her dark powers, the ability to conjure demons by placing odd trinkets in your home. And in the final act, she even uses a satanic teleportation ability when she's stalking the Warrens through her subterranean lair. So how will we defeat such a master Satanist? Will we rely on familial bonds of love or superior knowledge of religious orthodoxy like in the first two films? No, in this one, we're gonna go get a hammer and smash all of her shit! That's about the level of sophistication that we're dealing with here in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And for me, they might as well have taken that hammer to the entire Conjuring franchise, because sadly, I will not be looking forward to the next installment after this one.
That is a sad thing to say, because this was my favorite horror franchise.
I love
going
The Conjuring.
nowadays.
I
Yeah.
love the original Conjuring. I really like The Conjuring Part 2. I watched the Annabelle movies as well. I'm invested. James Wan has me hooked. This one, was a gut-shot disappointment for me.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the head with psychology.
Yeah.
Like, the building of the terror and that careful craft is gone here. It's kind of feels like cheap scares. They're throwing an exorcism at you right off the bat before you know the little boy, before you know the family, before you can even really care about what's going to happen, because you haven't really put the foundations there. And then we end up doing that later in the film. You've got to do it anyway. She uses her superpower to do a flashback.
It breaks the rules, too. Like, we don't really understand the limits so much. They were so artful in how they dealt with Lorraine Warren's kind of psychic ability in the first couple. In this one, it's like, what's that
too
stupid
over the
television
top.
show, like Medium or whatever, where the person has a psychic
Take your
ability.
pick. There's a million of them.
That solves crimes. And they fell into that. And then it's just like, oh, the reanimated corpse in the morgue is suddenly, like, charging after them. Is it real? Is it not real? And the whole psychic link between the two,
And
too
that felt
much.
cheap. That felt cheap too. That was like an invented gimmick because you had shown that exorcism at the start of the film, and that wasn't your main scare piece in the center of it. You had to throw something in at the end because otherwise it's just a boring detective story. This is mainly a detective story for a big chunk of it.
It is. And you know what? I thought the interesting part that they were going to attack was more the courtroom drama. A little bit of the actual reality of how they were trying to mount this defense of demonic possession in a legal setting. Interesting. Now, I know Exorcism of Emily Rose delved way into the legal drama. So if you want to see an exorcism movie that deals with, all right, the legal defenses of demonic possession in the courtroom, watch that movie. Tom Wilkinson's great in that movie. But I thought for sure they would do more of it here. There was virtually nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Because they're out in the woods and there's no real suspense unless she has that psychic powered link that can show you something that's supposed to be terrifying, but at the same time, we know it happened way in the past. We know she's not in any real jeopardy. So it doesn't have the visceral suspense or the impact that the first two Conjuring films did. And I was surprised to find out that this was the same writer that wrote The Conjuring Part 2.
You just told me that. I'm shocked because
Yeah.
I love The Conjuring Part 2. I thought it was artful. I thought it was understated. It was all the great things about The Conjuring. And this movie has none of that, which is why it's so bizarre. The woman uses a teleportation in the final act. She's zipping around in the
Whoa.
shadows.
What about the satanic dust she blows in Patrick Wilson's face to turn him into a mindless zombie? I mean, for me, it's
come
just like,
on.
why did
What
we
are
have
you
to?
doing?
Why did we have to turn down that road? I mean, it's so cliche and
Who's
bad.
it for? That's not your fan base.
And it's not terrifying either.
It's dumb.
It's
it
taken-
really is. It's stupid.
It's taken something the first film made so chilling and terrifying in the demonic possession, and it's using it as a kind of throwaway gag where it's like, yeah, you're possessed. You're possessed. You've got a demon now too. And it's like, what about the psychological breakdown that these people had to endure in the first Conjuring film before they were ready for that? It made it so much more terrifying that the little things around your house, the little sounds, the little happenings, those are all pieces of the puzzle that's building to something awful that's coming.
And it's stuff you experience in your own home, which scares the shit out of you. Because then you stop watching the movie and you hear a noise. And you're like, what was it? What was it? Right? There's none of that here. And the realism is gone.
Yeah.
Like, I thought the scene, like, who is the drunken moron who runs the kennel? Like, it was laughable. And the whole scene of how his murder came about, I thought was just, I mean, what a just mess that scene was.
Yeah.
Complete, like I had no idea what was going on. It was like a fever dream with just some drunken asshole running through it. It didn't land at all, and I'm really disappointed because I really liked The Conjuring, and I hoped for more. I thought it was the standard bearer for horror these days, and not anymore. And these are two fine actresses who deserve a heck of a lot better than this story.
Yeah, do you think that the Satanist group, the Disciples of the Ram,
Oh, for God.
because both the earlier films with the Annabelle doll and then with the nun in The Conjuring 2 kind of like did their spin-off supplemental films there, and I feel like maybe the Disciples of the Ram is what they were trying to do here with that Satanist group.
Try it. See how it goes. See how it goes.
You won't be buying a ticket.
No. I'm disappointed. I'm really let down because I'm a big fan of these movies and I really wanted to like this one. I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah, my favorite horror series going. Let's find out if it's still going with Dead or Alive.
Dead or alive. All right, we're back with Dead or Alive, and I'm going to go because everybody can guess. I'm sad.
You're sad.
I'm sad because I was on a roll. I thought, oh man, movies are coming back. We're getting some good ones. I thought this one for sure was. I thought it was a can't miss, and boy, oh boy, did it miss. So for me, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. It's dead. It's a 4 out of 10.
You die.
It is a tragic letdown, and yeah, we're all worse off for it. So I wish it would have been better. It's not. That's what it is.
Yeah, as I was watching it, I was kind of okay with things up to a point, but it's been a few days since I've watched it now, and I'm reflecting on it, and it's kind of just fading from my mind, whereas the first Conjuring film is so great. It's one of my all-time favorites, I think. It's so well done, and I'd put that first Conjuring maybe at an 8, maybe at a 9. Conjuring 2, I had that at about a 7.
And even that's got some good memorable scares to it too that I still
Yeah.
remember. Like really good imagery in that movie too.
But I was always impressed that they took the time and the craft to build to the terror and really reward you for investing yourself in those films. And this one, the story structure change really threw me. It's the mashup of a detective story with the horror.
I think it threw them, to be honest.
Yeah, it robbed us of that emotional buildup and then that terror, that payoff that they're so good at in the other films. We didn't get it here. We didn't get it. We got a mystery story. We got a kind of mediocre third act chase through the underground area to destroy the Satanist altar.
I couldn't believe what we were seeing at that point in the third act. Like this? It's devolved to this?
And I feel like it's a shame because this is probably, I don't know, is this the final Conjuring film? They jumped up to 1981. You can see they aged them appropriately. based on the other films as well. So I think we might be reaching the end of this.
I think you might be right, and that's sad. I want James Wan come back, direct another one, end on a high note.
So a 4 out of 10 for you. For me, I'm going with a 5.
A 5. All right.
A 5 out of 10. It is definitely dead, though. And the funny thing was, for a while, I had this as a 6 in my head.
Really?
Yeah, but then the more I kind of thought about it and really kind of looked at it in perspective with the films that came before it, it's not a 6. It's a 5, and you know.
Well, let
to
me ask you this, because I've been bagging on this film, say nothing but bad things about it. But you came in a bit higher than I did. Yeah. Where did you find the merit? Where did you find the good points in this film?
I was a little intrigued by the story about the disciples of the Ram, and the fact that you've got a master Satanist out there that's cursing people, and the fact that there was no real reason behind it. It's not like they were doing this because they wanted the house or they wanted insurance money or any of those hackneyed plot, machinations that you can throw in there.
Motivations.
This was basically, well, a master Satanist is just looking to cause anguish and terror on people. And that's kind of a terrifying thing. But at the same time, I feel like if it was the disciples of the Ram, rather than just one person, you might have had something more terrifying if we could have looked at like other ongoing cases and more artifacts, maybe stretch this story out over a few years too. There could have been something there. So I was intrigued by that a little bit. And I said, well, this is a little bit of a different thing. I'm willing to go with it. But then the thing we haven't talked about too is that awful scene in the prison at the end. You are cutting between the Warrens in the underground labyrinth trying to destroy the altar and the guy in jail who's getting possessed, who's flying up around the ceiling, whereas like all these flashing lights outside the prison, everyone's looking on at this and losing their minds about it, and you're kind of cross-cutting between the two locations. That's how you end it?
I mean, we got the hammer of God. We're going to smash that altar.
And it's the same thing. I remembered that part. I start thinking about these things, and suddenly that number starts to go down.
The waterbed scene? You like the waterbed scene? Little boy's playing on the waterbed. There's this demon in the waterbed.
That was stupid.
But to your point is, we already saw the little boy like contorted on the kitchen table, shrieking at people.
He gave it away.
So it's like, how can you be like? Well, I already know what happens to that little boy. He gets it pretty bad, but it's like, why would I be creeped out by whatever's going to happen to him on a waterbed?
And you didn't care about the little boy at that point. You care about him later in the film, I would argue. They do a good job of building his relationship there, but you didn't care about him in the moment, other than that he's a little boy. Now, think about if they had put that about the halfway point in the film, or maybe as the end of the second act, that they've kind of built this up, they're leading to it, like they did in the original Conjuring and the Conjuring Part 2. I'd argue you would have built in that terror, that would have been a more impactful, effective scene. At the beginning of the film, I felt like it's a throwaway.
I agree. But tell us, what do you guys think? We had extreme big thoughts about The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I know there's a lot of people out there who have something similar. Please let us know in the comments down below. If you like this, please give us a thumbs up. If you loved it, please give us some subscriptions, because we will be back and we will see you on the next one.